This woman is an exiled criminal. Don't be fooled by her glamorous clothes. Her story is actually very tragic, but being clever, she didn't just sit there waiting for things to happen. Instead, she skillfully used everyone around her to achieve the life she wanted. What's more, this is a story adapted from real events. 17-year-old Mary came from a fisherman's family. Unable to endure the constant hunger, she chose to run away from her parents, but out of starvation, she stole food from a noble lady and was caught red-handed. She was originally sentenced to hang, but the king suddenly showed mercy and exiled her to the New South Wales colony. Thus, she became one of the first people sent to pioneer and open up the land. 11 ships were loaded with all kinds of criminals, locked in harsh conditions in the holds like animals. The nobles and officials above enjoyed delicious meals every day. As the aroma of meat wafted down, all they could do was swallow hard. The days of unbearable hunger were agonizing. Occasionally, a drop of spilled wine on the ground was already a blessing from heaven. Even their dirty fingers were licked clean. In such desperate circumstances, she still had hope for the future. Her smile caught the interest of a sailor named William. Facing William, who was also exiled, she had no intention of wasting time. Finally, she got her chance. Knowing that a man named Clark was kind-hearted, she told him about her crime and exile, hoping he would sympathize with her situation and get her out of the terrible hold. She even ate the leftover food from Clark, and was willing to do anything he asked without complaint. A soldier suddenly appeared, interrupting their conversation. Watching this, William advised Mary to give up this unrealistic idea. Mary just smiled and looked at the sky, saying a storm was coming. As expected, an unexpected storm hit, catching everyone off guard. Locked in the hold, they had to hang in midair to avoid drowning. Her traveling companion Elizabeth, relying on experience, noticed Mary was pregnant and asked whose child it was. Mary replied it was the prison warden's. Elizabeth then understood. Mary was flattering Clark only for the sake of her unborn child. A huge wave crashed over, and Mary hit her head on the railing, fainting completely and sinking into the water. In a panic, William rescued Mary. Clark, arriving late, carried Mary out of the hold with a grave expression. Under Clark's careful care, Mary recovered quickly. He had his men fetch dozens of buckets of water to clean her, and even gave her his wife's clothes to wear. It turned out that before departure, Clark's wife, upon learning he was going to such a desolate place, had abandoned him, running off the ship without even taking her luggage, thus letting Mary benefit. From then on, Clark treated her like a princess. Mary secretly brought extra food to Elizabeth in the hold. Meanwhile, William, who had saved her life, watched their apparent happiness with concern.
Lag's wife. Suits you.
I'm nobody's wife.
Nice dress.
Clark took out his wife's most expensive dress for Mary to wear, but her growing belly made it impossible to fit. Taking Clark's hand, she happily announced she was pregnant, but Clark was shocked and turned away. Furious, Clark went to the hold. Thinking Elizabeth had corrupted Mary, he dragged Elizabeth onto the deck and whipped her 48 times. Mary, unable to bear it, was heartbroken. Staring at the cruel Clark, she was sure she had chosen the wrong side. She voluntarily returned to the hold to care for Elizabeth, whose back was covered in bloody whip wounds.
That was meant for me. I'm sorry.
From then on, William shared half his food with Mary, as her child needed nutrition. Time passed, and Mary gave birth to a baby girl in the hold. The baby's arrival silenced the entire hold, as if everyone worried about her future. Soon after, they finally reached the colony. Facing this barren land, could they really survive? But the lovely baby seemed to have given the answer. This sweet baby was the first new life born to exiles in the colony. To keep her child alive here, Mary had to rely on a capable man, and that task naturally fell to William, who had snuck in. As an excellent sailor, even if there was no food on land, they could always eat seafood.
After the ship,
Hello, Charlotte.
she needs a father. And I need a husband.
You need an awful lot.
Well, I've an awful lot to offer.
Living here, it will be different. It won't be a life any of us have ever known.
Well, even more reason to have people you're certain of.
They went to see the governor directly. If he provided boats and 20 men, William promised to ensure thousands in the colony had enough fish to eat, asking only for a share of the catch in return. Clark, however, tried every excuse to persuade the governor to refuse, not wanting his rival to be able to support Mary and her child. But the governor, weighing the pros and cons, approved William's request. Mary took the opportunity to propose marrying William, and to Clark's despair, the governor agreed. The next day, a marriage registry was set up, and they held a simple wedding before a priest. No rings, no blessings from relatives or friends, only a unique wedding room in the wilderness. Early the next morning, two single men tried to act as grooms to Mary. As her husband, William fought to protect her, grabbing a stick and chasing them away. But the colony was in chaos, with women being bullied everywhere. The understaffed authorities could only watch the tragedies unfold, focusing all their forces on guarding the granary, thus maintaining control over everyone's lifeline. Mary shuddered at the horrifying scenes. If she hadn't been in the wilderness, she would have suffered the same fate. The governor gathered everyone, announcing a strict curfew to prevent further tragedies. Anyone approaching a woman's tent, for any reason, would be shot. 3 years passed. With little more than a few houses built, none of the expected goals achieved. Food shortages and stinking air left people facing both hunger and relentless disease. Mary's family grew with a baby boy, but supporting 4 people became increasingly difficult. Clark built a house across from Mary's, watching their lives, waiting for his chance. He revoked William's right to fish, citing unfair food distribution, pushing them to the brink. The shabby hospital was filled with patients. Many children couldn't hold on and died. Witnessing this, Mary's resolve only strengthened. In front of her family and friends, she proposed an escape plan if she could get a seaworthy ship, enough food, and rely on her husband's sailing experience. They might escape this living hell. William knew they'd need more than food, guns to fend off savages, navigation instruments, and various supplies. The odds seemed impossible, but Mary kept encouraging him. William and Sam took action, filling bags with sand to impersonate flour. Mary lied to distract the granary guards while William rushed in with 2 sandbags. By chance, Clark passed by on patrol, saw the granary door open, and chased out the accountant, who was pretending to keep records. William and Sam were locked inside. That night, Elizabeth distracted the guards, allowing William and Sam to escape. To get the granary key, Mary had no choice but to swallow her pride and hatch a bold plan. She took the 2 children to knock on Clark's door, ignoring her husband's objections. This was her only way out. Clark, thinking she'd changed her mind, served them food and gave the little girl a doll he'd kept for years. The girl refused it, but the soft-hearted Clark still let them stay. Late at night, Mary secretly took the granary key, went to the window, and passed it to her husband. Their eyes met, filled with unspoken words they couldn't utter. With the key, the food problem for their escape was solved, but their actions were seen by Martin. The next day, Martin gathered several other sailors, joining the escape plan and offering advice on the route. Martin was overly alert, nearly hurting the little girl. He also carried a hidden knife, and Mary, noticing, began to keep her distance. Meanwhile, guards at the granary discovered the flour had been replaced with sand. Clark knew there was only one key, which he kept with him. Someone must have made a copy. He demanded an explanation from Mary. Their escape supplies were ready. Today was the day, but Elizabeth, who had distracted the granary guards, had caught the disease and could no longer escape. Late at night, Martin woke the other sailors, telling them to gather at the meeting point with supplies. William and Sam had secured a boat, hiding it on a secluded beach and loading their supplies. William, worried Mary hadn't arrived, sent one of Martin's men to fetch her, but the man hid under a tree, drinking. Clark, waking to find Mary gone, checked the living room. Realizing what was happening, he launched a pursuit. The drunk man, failing to find Mary, led the pursuers straight to them. To avoid total disaster, they had to set sail from the shore. At the critical moment, Mary appeared with their 2 children.
Come on! Come on! Wait! Mary! There! Come on! What the hell are you doing here? Let go!
These criminals, escaping gunfire, hoped the small boat would carry them thousands of miles back to their homeland. Could these two young children survive such a deadly journey? Worse, cannon fire had holed the hull. Seawater was destroying most of their food. They had to stop at a desert island to fix things. Facing the freedom they dreamed of, they cheered wildly. In the bright sunshine, Mary's face was full of happiness. They even imagined creating new identities, integrating into high society. They didn't know that the furious Clark was obsessed with tracking them down. Early the next morning, Martin spotted Clark's pursuing party, rushing back to the beach to tell everyone to pack and flee. Clark, failing to find them, was about to leave in disappointment when a gunshot rang out. It was Sam, who'd shot a wild animal without realizing the danger. Clark followed the sound, and a thrilling gunfight erupted. On the front line, Martin fought 10 enemies alone, buying time for the others to get on the boat. Having knocked down one enemy, he took the opportunity to retreat from the position and run back to the boat. Seeing this, William immediately covered Martin's retreat.
Come on!
Stay down!
No! Put our sail up!
They escaped again under a hail of bullets. Clark carefully observed the people on the boat and found that Sam was not on board. He immediately set a trap. Sam, who had returned from hunting, shouted for help to them. William looked carefully and saw no sign of Clark. As everyone was discussing whether to save Sam, Mary hardened her heart, took the helm directly, and steered the boat toward the middle of the sea. Sam watched their departing figures and shed tears of despair. Then Clark, lying in ambush in the dark, captured Sam. Clark took one last look at Mary, his heart filled with mixed emotions. Everyone blamed Mary for being too cruel. Even her own husband reprimanded her. In fact, she felt bad too, but from a mother's perspective, her approach was not wrong at all. 10 consecutive days at sea, enduring the scorching sun all day, having to struggle to bail water out of the cabin without food or fresh water. Everyone was exhausted. The little baby stared anxiously at her exhausted mother, stamping her feet in frustration. They finally reached an island, but it attracted the savages. One of the sailors was unfortunately hit by the savages.
Go, go!
On Sam's side, he was tortured by Clark until he was covered in bruises, but he never revealed a single detail about the escape route. The governor killed him as an example in front of everyone to defend the authority of this land. The young Sam was killed. After days of storms, William, who had been full of enthusiasm, suddenly felt timid and was unwilling to go to the next destination because he had never had the experience of sailing 5,000 kilometers across the sea. And this was a dilapidated small boat. Martin and the others, well aware of the risks of crossing to the next target, lost confidence and began discussing getting rid of Mary's family. Anyway, they had escaped. Currently, one more person meant one more burden. Their group could completely take control of the boat and leave. Mary, having had enough of these robbers, was determined to teach them a good lesson. She knew very well that these robbers had long wanted to get rid of her and the two children on the escape route. If that was the case, then no one would survive. Without her accurate predictions of future weather, they wouldn't last a week before being swallowed by the eerie sea breeze. At this time, her husband arrived upon hearing the news, and it just so happened that she also gave the listless William a good scolding. Mary's words made everyone suddenly realize,
Wonderful madness. The kind that strong men grab with both hands, not the kind that eats away at weak and frightened men. Now, there's a strong wind. We should take it.
Martin took the initiative to step forward to set sail. The other sailors had no choice but to follow their leader. 43 days passed since they left. The idle little girl took the nautical charts and instruments as toys and threw them into the sea. William, who woke up, immediately stopped the girl. Looking at the instruments sinking into the sea, he felt completely desperate, because they were now lost. The sailor whose foot was injured by the savages did not receive effective treatment, and the wound became infected, leading to his death. 57 days into the escape, Everyone was dying from the scorching sun. Their once fair faces were gone forever. She used all her strength to hoist the sail, then struggled to climb over to her daughter, but the girl showed no response. She immediately stuck her finger in her own mouth, moistened it with saliva, and dabbed it on her daughter's parched lips. She struggled to take out a nautical instrument, checked the position of the sun, and adjusted the boat's direction with her remaining strength. The next day, when William woke up, he untied Mary's hand that was tied to the steering wheel. Then everyone woke up and miraculously arrived at a small island.
Mary Bryant, you've saved our miserable bloody lives.
On Clark's side in the colony, a large ship loaded with supplies arrived, along with 50,000 prisoners exiled to the colony. It seemed that even trivial matters could get one arrested as a criminal. Therefore, all the first batch of management personnel could return to England. Mary and her group tried to deceive the island's king with their fabricated noble identities, claiming that all documents proving their identity had sunk into the sea after a shipwreck. The king, upon hearing their tragic experience, couldn't help but be suspicious. It was almost impossible to survive a voyage of thousands of kilometers in a small boat. But the king's wife, Marlene, picked up the cute little baby and liked it very much. She directly asked her husband to issue an inspection-exempt certificate. Thus, they transformed into English nobles and lived a life where men wore silk stockings. They attended various balls every day. Mary's heroic deeds spread throughout the streets and alleys. She gave men the strength and courage to continue living when they were about to give up. Even when they lost their way, she cleverly found the right direction. A large number of upper-class men vied to dance with Mary. William, consumed by jealousy, naturally felt uncomfortable. Marlene, who saw through everything, came to ease his unhappiness. Martin and the remaining sailor also found their significant others. To prevent their identities from being exposed, Mary gently explained the situation to her daughter and asked her to keep the secret. When they returned to England, her daughter would be able to run freely on her grandfather's large lawn. Soon, an English ship entered the port. She quickly closed the door. Based on the king's description, Clark immediately decided to come and arrest her. Unexpectedly, Mary had already escaped. Clark immediately launched a citywide manhunt. Soon, one of the sailors was caught. Unwilling to wait for his fate, the sailor decided to fight, but was shot in the leg. Then another sailor was also caught by Clark. Unexpectedly, this man, in order to survive, betrayed William, who was hiding elsewhere. Taking advantage of Clark's departure to arrest William, he tried to escape, but the soldiers shot him directly. Clark's men quickly surrounded William. With no way out, William put up a stubborn resistance, and Clark shot him full of holes. Marlene felt great sympathy for Mary's situation. She helped them escape to the jungle and told them to wait at a location ahead. She went back to inform William to meet them. Mary, holding the baby and dragging her daughter, walked laboriously forward, completely unaware that her husband had been killed. Cold and hungry, they had to sleep in the wild. The sound of wild animals in the distance was particularly terrifying, making them too scared to breathe. The little baby was full of curiosity about the world. The next day, the baby, not seeing her father, shed tears of disappointment. Mary, who hadn't waited for her husband, also became extremely low-spirited. Unexpectedly, she waited for Clark's man. Clark directly pounced on her, covered her mouth, and gave her a choice.
I've thought of nothing but you.
And now you've helped us again. I need to get my children away from here. I need a boat.
You have no idea who I am.
With the sound of a gunshot, the relationship between Clark and Mary came to an end. Marlene gave Clark a large sum of money, enough to cover the economic losses caused by Mary's group. Mary looked at the people locked in cages, but didn't see her husband. She anxiously asked them about William's whereabouts, but they couldn't say a word, only lowering their heads in silence. During the 9-month voyage back to England, the conditions in the cabin were even worse than what they had experienced before. Mary's 2 children both contracted tropical diseases. Due to their young age, neither of them survived.
In the knowledge that they were innocent children, Charlotte and Emmanuel Bryant, to the deep. Amen.
My baby.
Mary.
From then on, Mary became listless, but her story made headlines in major media, moving countless people. They all felt injustice for her, sending blessings and gifts. In the trial court, various evidences pushed Mary and the other two to destruction. The judge directly announced that they would be sentenced to death by hanging. The audience immediately erupted, unanimously opposing the judge's verdict. The boiling scene rekindled Mary's confidence. A choked monologue was touching and powerful, every word striking a chord. These words moved the jury.
But most are not. Most are men and women who risk their lives to feed themselves and their families. Guilty we may be, but worthless we are not. There are many like us in this country. And to transport us away is another country's gain. But I stole away for the sake of my children. I could not see them starve. I have lost everything I hold dear to me. My husband. My children. So you can take my life. The courage they have should not be choked out of them.
Directly changing the trial result and pardoning Mary and the other two, Mary returned to her hometown. Looking at the empty prairie, she could no longer fulfill the promise she once made to her beloved daughter. I'm a movie enthusiast. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.